I've noticed something about men. We'll work our entire lives to get freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, mental freedom. And then the moment we get a little bit of it, we give it away for convenience. Usually in the form of sharing a lease. If you put your name on the lease. Now let me be clear before anyone gets in their feelings, gets emotional. It's not about hating women. It's not about avoiding commitment or not being afraid of relationships or whatever. But it's understanding how environments shape your behavior and how quality men lose themselves when they start controlling their own pace, or they don't have their own space, though they're not. Most men don't notice it happening, and that's the scary part. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly. And by the time you realize something feels off, you're already in somebody's spot, moving to the rhythm of their beat. Let's chop it up. When a man lives alone, life is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. You wake up when you want to wake up. You eat when you're hungry. You work when you focus. Your environment reflects your priorities, not someone else's expectations. Your apartment might be a little empty. It might be a little quiet, but it's yours. It's honest. Now compare that to moving in with a woman. Suddenly your space becomes a shared space, a shared vision. And that sounds nice until you realize the vision isn't yours. Stuff is moving around. You gotta move your desk. You gotta shift around your schedule. The things you do start to get questions. Why you out so late? Why you staying at work so late? Why you always on your phone? Why you always on your laptop? Why you need so much alone time? And these are not aggressive questions. They subtle. They framed as concern. But over time, over and over, they start to add weight. Here's something men don't like to admit. We need solitude to stay sharp. Not isolation, solitude. We need stretches of uninterrupted time where nobody needs nothing from us. No explaining, no negotiating, no adjusting, no arguing. That's where a man's clarity comes from. That's where his ambition survives. When you live alone, solitude is built into the structure of your life. When you live with a woman, solitude has to be requested. And that changes everything. Because once you have to ask for space, it's no longer yours, bro. Most men, they move in for logical reasons. It makes sense financially. You feel like y'all already basically living together because y'all together all day anyway. You either at her crib or she at your crib or whatever it might be. You might feel like it's the next step. You're at a certain point in your relationship and that's just kind of where it's going. So you feel like that's the thing to do. Then half of you might be like, well, I pay 2 rents, She always over here. Why you got your crib? You might as well, or you know what? I'm just at her crib. Why? What we paying 2 rents for? We might as well just get, And these are fair points. But men don't lose themselves through logic. They lose themselves through comfort. And sharing rent becomes sharing routines. Sharing routines becomes shared expectations. And shared expectations quietly replace your own standards. you start optimizing for harmony. You start kind of go along and get along instead of growing. Instead of where you would stand on business for your purpose and get to a certain point, you gotta fall to the wayside to make this thing work right here. You gotta compromise. You gotta start making deals. You start doing things that cause friction, even if it's good for you. You want to keep the peace. You know, if it's staying late at work, if it's getting up early to go train, you know, if it's just being silent, being quiet for a long period of time, you can't do that no more because, you know, it's not just you no more. Those things become a phase more so than it was your lifestyle. There's also something no one else talks about. When a man moves into a woman's emotional world, he starts to become reactive. Even if the apartment is technically neutral, you know, y'all both got y'all names on the lease or whatever, the emotional center of it is not neutral. You feel what I'm saying? It's still like, it's hush. Because if she say you gotta go, yeah, you feel me? You know how that go. So you'll start adjusting your energy to maintain peace. You monitor moods in the crib. You soften the edges a little bit. You ain't so rough cut no more. Again, not because you weak, because you adapting. But that adaptation has a cost. Over time, your nervous system learns that stillness equals safety, not momentum. Not that risk that you used to take. Safety. And safety is the enemy of becoming exceptional. A lot of men will push back and say, but, you know, what about healthy relationships? Fair question. Healthy relationships require two whole individuals choosing to come together, not two people dissolving into one person's lifestyle. The strongest relationships I've seen involve distance, not emotional distance, structural distance, separate spaces, separate routines, separate worlds internally. They together by choice, but not by default. You're not codependent on each other. When you live together, togetherness stops being intentional. It becomes background noise. And desire doesn't survive background noise. Another uncomfortable truth. When a man lives with a woman, his edge dulls. Not immediately, gradually. He becomes more predictable, more accessible, less dangerous, in a good way. The version of him that used to disappear into his work for hours, that version starts explaining himself. The version that didn't care about being misunderstood starts clarifying. His hunger softens, and that hunger is sacred. This is why so many men feel lost in relationships, but they can't explain why. Nothing is wrong. You know, the woman, she's supportive. The relationship is stable. Everything's good. Life looks good on paper. But internally, something feels off. That's not toxicity. That's compression. You can't compress a man's world and expect him to expand. Now, could exceptions exist? Sure. Most of them, they're not exceptions, you know. Most men are the rule. And the rule is, men do better when they own their own space. Physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever. A man with his own place, he just moves differently, thinks differently, plans longer. He's not rushing to get to the crib. He's not trying to fill up the silence. He's not slowly reshaping himself to fit a shared mold. He's building. What most women want is presence. What most men need is purpose. Those two things can coexist, but not when one replaces the other. Moving in, yeah, it often feels like progress. But progress isn't closeness. Progress is alignment. And alignment doesn't require shared walls. I think a lot of men are afraid to say this out loud. They don't want to seem selfish or immature or emotionally unavailable. But protecting your environment isn't avoidance. It's leadership. You can love deeply and still live separately. You can be committed without being compressed. You can choose someone without surrendering your rhythm, your emotion. So if you're a man considering moving in with your lady, ask yourself this first, honestly. Does this expand my life or simplify it? Does it add to it? Or is it going to be more taken away? Does this sharpen me or is it going to soften me? Am I choosing this because it's right? Or is it, it's just the easiest thing to do? It's the least passive resistance. Because comfort is seductive. It lures you in. And erosion is quiet. Over time it just wears you down. And most men don't realize what they lost until they can't remember when the last time they fully felt themselves. I'm not saying never fall in love. I'm not saying don't have intimacy. I'm saying guard the space where you want to be who you meant to be at. Because once that space disappears, everything else eventually follows. And no one tells you that up front. It just tells you it makes sense. It's your boy, man.